All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much for joining us. I'm sure we'll be joined by a few more folks as time passes, but want to respect your time and start as close to on time as we possibly can while letting everyone join us here at the Lehigh Virtual Town Hall. As you can see, the agenda is posted on your screen, and I should begin by introducing myself. I'm County Supervisor Joe Simitian. I represent the 5th Supervisorial District, which is about 400,000 folks in the northwest portion of Santa Clara County, including pretty much all of Cupertino and certainly all of the property known as Lehigh in our area. I should also indicate that this is the 6th annual town hall regarding the Lehigh cement plant and the Permanente Quarry. So thank you for joining us. Obviously, the first time we've done this one online, and I think that it will allow even more folks to participate. So that's the upside of doing it online tonight under the circumstances. I should point out that I began holding these meetings when I first returned to the Board of Supervisors back in 2013, after I kind of took stock of things, because my sense at the time was that the community had questions about what was happening at the Lehigh site, both with respect to the cement plant and the quarry, and that it wasn't always easy to figure out how to get those questions answered. So my hope tonight is that we'll be able to get answers to the questions that you and your neighbors have. We certainly got a wide-ranging panel of federal, state, and local regulators here to take your questions and share what they have been doing in their various regulatory roles. And after some brief background remarks on my part, we will get to that Q&A portion of the evening. I think based on our experience in years past, it is helpful for folks to understand that prior to my return to the Board of Supervisors back in 2013, the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors took two important actions. In 2011, the Board of Supervisors made what's known as a determination on vested rights. And this is a term you're going to hear tossed around tonight, so I'll say it again, a determination on vested rights. And essentially, they determined where on the property mining activities could occur without a use permit, and where a use permit from the county would be required. That's what this issue of vested rights is fundamentally about. Having said that, I think it's important to just mention, I'm guessing most of the folks on the call tonight know it, but the Lehigh facility has two operations that are side by side, a quarry and a cement plant. And while we tend to think of them as part of the same enterprise, from a regulatory standpoint, they really are very different creatures, and often regulated in very different ways by the various regulatory bodies. So as I mentioned, back in 2011, there was this determination on vested rights, and that was a key decision at the time. And then in 2012, the following year, the Board of Supervisors approved what's known as an amendment to the Quarry's Reclamation Plan. So you'll hear vested rights and Reclamation Plan a lot tonight. The Reclamation Plan is the document that outlines the plan and timing for how the site will be restored upon the conclusion of the mining. So changes to the existing mining footprint that are within the vested area, as it was defined by the board back in 2011, changes in that footprint are likely to require an amendment then to the Reclamation Plan, which is the document that describes what happens once the process has come to some conclusion. I should tell you all that both of the decisions of the board back in 2011 and 2012 were taken to court by folks who had a different point of view, and they were heard both at the Superior Court level and then heard on appeal at the appellate court level. And in both cases, the county prevailed. So the vested rights and Reclamation Plan that were approved by that prior board are in place as approved by the Board of Supervisors back in 2011 and 2012. I've had people who have pointed out a couple times, but that doesn't mean they were good decisions by the board. It just means that they were legal based on the decision of the courts, and that's certainly the case. The question before the courts wasn't, was it a good decision or even was it the right decision? Just was it a legal decision? And the courts determined in both instances that they were in fact lawfully decided and would stand. So since I was sworn in again upon my return to the Board of Supervisors in January of 2013, I have taken some steps to provide what I would describe as sort of stepped up or increased oversight of the activity at the Lehigh facility. And I would say, many of them are probably best described as incremental, but I think when taken together, they have both good and significant results. So let me just briefly describe what some of those were. One of the things I was concerned about when I came back to the board was just the importance of having folks out on the site from the county, seeing firsthand what was or wasn't happening on the site, boots on the ground, for lack of a better expression. So what had been maybe a once or twice a year visit was stepped up, and we went to having folks from the county out on the site on more or less a monthly basis, which I thought was more appropriate given the importance of what was happening at Lehigh. We also, I thought, quickly confronted the fact that because there are so many different agencies and regulatory bodies at the federal, state, regional, and local level, I thought it was important that they get together at least a couple times a year, sit down around the table, and share information about who was doing what, largely to make sure that there wasn't anything that needed to be done that wasn't getting done because it was overlooked or simply because somebody thought that was somebody else's area of responsibility. And there are probably a dozen different agencies. We're fortunate to have 7 or 8 of them with us tonight. But that coordination between and among the various agencies, I thought was essential. And I asked our county staff to sort of be the host body to pull everybody together to make sure that that was happening. I also thought that it was important along the way to review what is known as what are known as the conditions of approval. Whenever there's a permit or a plan amendment, there are a series of conditions attached to that, saying, yes, you may go forward and do this activity, but here are the things that you have to do in order for that to be allowed. I asked my own office to take a careful look. And in fact, we did find a performance bond that had simply not been posted. This is a financial guarantee that ensures that certain work will be done or that the funds are there to do that work if it doesn't get done by the property owner. Relatively modest amount, $75,000. But I thought it was important both to do the due diligence and also to make sure that all of the conditions were being respected. A simple thing like asking the planning department to upgrade the website, because I didn't see how the public could be fully engaged if we didn't make the information clearly and readily available. They needed to be engaged. More frequent updates to our Board of Supervisors and to our committees. And I should mention that is happening. I sit on the Housing, Land Use, Environment, and Transportation Committee, and we have a more frequent opportunity at greater length to sort of wade through some of these issues. And I think that's helpful in terms of adherence to the various conditions of approval and making sure that there's real accountability. Monthly calls between my office and the folks at Lehigh. Sometimes I participate in them. More often than not, my chief of staff, who is also my principal land use aide, handles that responsibility. Frankly, those have fallen off a little bit during the COVID period, but we established a protocol because I thought every month there should be a formal check-in between our office, even though we are not obviously the planning department or the regulatory body per se. But I just thought we should have that monthly interaction. Noise monitoring has been stepped up in response to concerns that have been raised over the years. And then, of course, finally, this annual town hall, I thought it was important that we have folks from these various agencies report out to you and to other elected officials who are participating, as you'll hear in a moment, report out to you what they had been doing during the year past and also take questions. And it didn't seem to me that that was likely to happen if somebody didn't convene a meeting for just that purpose. And that's what we're doing tonight, and what we have done over these last several years now, by way of the now 6 public meetings of this type, where you can get your questions answered from the agencies that regulate the quarry and the cement plant. So thank you again for being here. I should tell you that we have a number of folks who have joined us tonight, and I really do appreciate their presence because, as you'll hear in a bit, many of them play a role at some level in regulating the activities out at the Lehigh site. So I do want to recognize some of the elected officials who are RSVP'd, thank them and their representatives for being here tonight. Let me start locally with Mayor Darcy Paul and council members Hung Wei and Kitty Moore from Cupertino. Thank you for being here tonight. Also council members Anita Anandar and Sally Meadows, as well as Jonathan Weinberg from Los Altos. Thank you, council members, for being here. From Los Altos Hills, Lisa Schmidt, a new council member. Welcome, council member. Thank you for being with us. We have water board representatives who are participating as well. And that would be Valley Water Board directors Linda Lazat and Nai Shui. Thank you, Nisa Fleiger, for letting us know that you're with us, Madam Mayor from Los Altos. Forgive the oversight. That's someone who's on the ball and knows how to communicate. So I appreciate your being with us as well. A host of folks from the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. And thank you for being with us. We've got the district board president, Kurt Riffle. We've got the vice president, Zoe Kirstein Tucker. We've got directors Jed Sear and Karen Holman and Pete Siemens and Yoriko Kishimoto. So thank you for being with us from the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. I'm seeing on my screen that Suds Jane, a new council member from Santa Clara, is with us as well, and Lynette Lee Eng. Thank you for joining us as well from the Los Altos Council. So appreciate your being here. And then at the federal and state level, thank you to Tom Pike, who's here representing Congressman Ro Khanna. Appreciate your presence, Tom, and the fact that the congressman has sent you our way tonight. Very much appreciate your attention and engagement. Alex Kobayashi, who is with the Office of State Senator Josh Becker. Thank you to the senator and his staff for being with us. Diana Torres, on behalf of State Senator Dave Cortese, is with us tonight. And Juliana Park, on behalf of State Assembly Member Evan Lowe, who's here. So a lot of folks with eyes on this process. Thank you again for being here. I see that our number of participants has climbed to more than 200 tonight. So again, thank you all. Just, you know, I think at this point I should, if you're wondering how the evening will unfold, particularly because we're virtual, it will be a little bit different than it has in years past. So let me just explain that. No need to be writing your questions on cards and handing them to staff, obviously. That's how we've done it in years past, and it's worked pretty well. But tonight, that's not going to work. So instead, what we've done is we collected as many questions as we could up front from folks as you all registered. And just to show you the level of interest, I've got more than 70 questions sitting here in a stack, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. And a lot of very, not just good questions, but illuminating questions, and I want to get to as many of them as we can. We've also enabled the Q&A function that Zoom offers. So if you are watching at home, you can submit your questions online. And what I would say is please use that Q&A function, just type your question in. And if we have time, I will pose it to the appropriate panelist. We are not using the raised hand function. Let me say that again. We are not using the raised hand function. So please don't go there. Just use that Q&A function unless we already have your question. And again, we had 70 plus from folks who came to us with questions as they registered. In years past, we have been able to take questions that we just didn't have time for, get questions after the meeting, and then post those on our website. We're going to try and do that again this year. I can't guarantee that absolutely positively every question will be addressed. Sometimes folks flood us, frankly, or ask a question that may be off point, but We will answer as many as we possibly can without regard to point of view. And they'll be posted on my site, supervisorsimitian.org, or at the planning department site. And I'll ask my staff to put the website address in the chat for you, and also for the planning department site as well. But again, we'll get to as many of these questions as we possibly can. So I'm going to begin now. Thank you for your patience with that long introduction. I'm going to begin by asking the panel to introduce themselves, and as they do that, to give us a brief update on what they've been up to over the past year with respect to Lehigh. And then I'll get to the questions that were submitted during the registration process, as we're generating a question queue as well. And we will adjourn promptly at 8:30. Want to make sure again that we respect your time and let everybody get a good night's sleep. So if you have a question, don't forget to submit it through the Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. And probably one last detail worth mentioning is that tonight's meeting is both live streamed but also recorded. And so if you miss a piece, want to go back and listen, something went by you too quickly, or you have a friend or a neighbor or colleague who would like to listen who wasn't able to make themselves available tonight, not to worry. It will be there on my website, supervisorsimitian.org. Okay, then, that was a lot. Thank you for your patience, as I say. We're now going to go to the panel. And as I say, panelists, thank you for being with us. It's kind of you to make this time at what I know is the end of your business day. So it's a long business day. And again, I appreciate it. I'm going to ask you, as I mentioned, to briefly introduce yourselves as I call you out. Tell us your name, your agency's name, and then just 2 or 3 minutes, if you would please, of a summary of the kind of oversight that your agency provides at the Lehigh site and what that agency oversight has looked like over the course of the past year. So we'll move our way through the panel, starting with the United States Environmental Protection Agency, to be followed by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. So Ms. Brumbaugh, you are up first from US EPA, and what do you want to share with us?
Thank you for this opportunity, for allowing us to join the town hall. My name is Roshni Brumbutt, and I'm the Air Enforcement Manager of the Environmental Protection Agency Region 9 office here in San Francisco. Region 9 consists of California, Arizona, Hawaii, Nevada, and the Pacific Islands. Our role is to provide federal oversight of facilities located in Region 9, and specifically my role is to provide oversight for facilities subject to the Clean Air Act in Region 9. So recently, as of November 2020, Lehigh Cement entered into a national consent decree covering 14 kilns and 11 facilities in 7 different EPA regions with 7 different state and district co-plaintiffs, including Bay Area. One such facility of the 11 facilities is the Lehigh facility in Cupertino. And since this is a national consent decree, the Department of Justice is primarily tasked to ensure that the terms of the consent decree are met, and our role at the EPA Region 9 office is to play a supporting role in this oversight and making sure that they're in compliance with the consent decree terms. And so that is just a brief summary of what we've been looking at for the last 12 months with the consent decree specifically for the Lehigh facility.
And Ms. Brumbutt, forgive me, some of the panelists will know I will step in to try and bottom line some of the information, or to take information that may be a little technical along the way. So if someone is a resident in the vicinity of the plant, that decree that you described, what does it do for them? As a result of that decree, how do their lives change? Get better or worse? I'm hoping better.
Yes, we are also hoping for better. So the consent decree requires the facility to have tighter emission controls, emission limits on their nitrogen oxide. So better air quality at the end of the day is the purpose of this consent decree. So there's the permitted limit will be decreased for NOx. For the sulfur dioxides that the facility has, they'll be modifying their lime injection system, which is another way of controlling sulfur dioxides. And then we'll be setting an emission limit for that through a test and set method. And overall, we'll be working with Bay Area to make sure all of these modifications from the consent decree are in their permit.
All right. So if I brought it down to the sort of most basic level, assuming this all goes as planned, there will be less bad stuff in the air. Is that the answer? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. No, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but I also want to make sure that amidst the technical understanding that is important to a lot of the folks on this call, we also bottom line it in every case possible. All right, thank you. We'll go now to Mr. Cave and Mr. Marvin, who will be speaking for the Air District. Gentlemen, one or both of you?
Well, we'll both be speaking. I'll start off. So I'm John Marvin. I'm a compliance and enforcement manager at the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. You'll also know us as the Air District or BAAQMD, or sometimes we're called BACMed. So the Air District is a regional air pollution control agency that regulates stationary sources within the 9 counties surrounding the Bay. This includes Lehigh. And the California Air Resources Board, or ARB, is the state agency that regulates mobile sources. So that's just to give you a difference. We regulate stationary sources, California Air Resources Board, the mobile sources. They do give us some delegation of authority for mobile source enforcement also at the Air District though. So the Air District was established in 1955 and has delegated authority to enforce federal and state air pollution regulations, as well as authority to promulgate and enforce its own local air pollution regulations. This past year at Lehigh, we've issued 1 notice of violation to Lehigh for excessive visible emissions from the main stack, and that was back in March of last year. The violation was corrected expeditiously. We responded to and investigated 14 air pollution complaints. And in terms of permitting, there wasn't much going on, but I can finally say that we did approve the facility's Title V renewal, and that permit was re-upped last May. And so now I'll pass the baton to my colleague, Robert Cave, and he'll discuss our efforts with the Lehigh Consent Decree. And Robert works for our rural development team and has led the development of the Air District's Portland cement manufacturing regulation.
All right, we're going to go then to Mr. Marvin, and he will be followed by Mr. Johnson from the Water Board. Just want to give Mr. Johnson the courtesy of a heads up.
I think we're going to go to me, Robert.
Excuse me, I had it backwards.
Okay. Hi, I'm Robert Cave. I'm a senior air quality engineer in rural development, which is part of the community engagement and policy section. And let's see, so let me draw up my script. As John mentioned, the Air District works in coordination with both the California Air Resources Board and the US EPA to enforce and administer air quality programs. For example, the Title V permit, which you may hear about, is actually a federal program that the Air District administers for the federal government. The Title V referring to Title V of the Federal Clean Air Act. We adopted our Regulation 913, which governs emissions from Portland cement manufacturing facilities in 2012, at a time when the US EPA was promulgating more stringent air toxic requirements for cement kilns, and the Air District sought greater emission control of NOx and PM as part of the modifications necessary to meet the revised federal rule. As Rosni mentioned, US EPA has reached a legal settlement with Lehigh to reduce emissions at several facilities across the US. The Air District is a co-plaintiff in that settlement, and so we are working to support US EPA to address the parts of that settlement which are specific to operations at the Lehigh Cupertino facility. At the time that the consent decree became final, the Air District produced a frequently asked questions sheet, and we have since updated that document, and it's available on our website. So if members of the public have more specific questions about the consent decree, they can consult that. And it's hard to find on our website by scrolling through the different pages, but if you go to our main web page and in the search bar put Lehigh FAQ, then it'll send you right to it. So I'll put that information in the chat for folks to be able to seek out that information.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Marvin and Mr. Cave, in that order, now that I've got that squared away. Let's go now to Mr. Johnson, who is here with us from the Water Board, and will be followed by our county's county council office. So let's hear from folks at the Water Board.
Good evening, everybody. So I'm Bill Johnson. I'm with the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Quality Control Board. And specifically, I'm the chief of the Npds Wastewater and Enforcement Division there, which is just one of the several divisions at the Regional Water Board that oversees Lehigh. So the Regional Water Board is actually a state agency, but we're responsible for water quality specifically in the San Francisco Bay region. And of course, our mission is to preserve, enhance, and restore this region's water resources for the benefit of the people who are here now and the people who will be here in the future. So with respect to Lehigh, our primary role in recent years has been to oversee two major permits. One is an Npds permit, which regulates discharges from the facility site into Permanente Creek. So water discharges into the creek and making sure that those discharges protect water quality in the creek. The other permit is, they're called waste discharge requirements, and they oversee the waste containment units on site to make sure that water that hits those containment units protects the groundwater beneath us. So we're also involved in the future restoration of Permanente Creek, and of course the reclamation plans. And as they get if there are changes proposed, we're involved in making sure that those are great for water quality too. So it's been a quiet year, which for us is a good thing. Not that long ago, we were much more involved with the Lehigh facility. And back in 2014, we had we issued a permit and an enforcement action that required Lehigh to really reconfigure a lot of the way that its site operated and channel a lot of the water into ponds for treatment and build a treatment system to remove selenium from the wastewater before it was discharged. So over several years, Lehigh did everything that we required in that enforcement action. And so now what we have is a site that actually hasn't had any significant violations in the last year. The only violations aren't actually related to those two permits that I talked about. There actually were two spills of potable water. So we're following up on those with Lehigh. Before I close up, I just want to say that the big issue of water quality concern at the Lehigh site has been primarily one related to selenium. And the amount of selenium that's discharged now is actually well within water quality objectives. In fact, we have two water quality objectives related to selenium that we're making sure that we meet. One relates to human health, the other relates to aquatic life and wildlife. And it turns out that the aquatic life number is lower by a factor of 10 than the human health drinking water standard. And so we are much more stringent than necessary to protect human health, and we're also protecting aquatic life. And so things look pretty good. And that's given us a little bit of space to back up and make sure that we're just spending some time on other facilities in the region. And I just want to point out for those who are listening in from your community, you might be interested, that it's given us time to kind of go over the hill and take a look at the Stevens Creek Quarry and make sure that we're overseeing their discharges appropriately. So we're just engaged on a similar process there. And just yesterday or today, we posted a draft permit for that facility and a draft cease and desist order and another enforcement order to help that facility come into compliance with what's required and necessary to meet water quality standards. So that is available out on our website today. And I can put that website in the chat if anybody is interested in that.
Please do. But before we ask you to do that, first, let me say, Mr. Johnson, you're really a pillar of tact if you can call a cease and desist order an effort to help that facility. So I'm very, very impressed with your phrasing there. I did want to, however, see if we could take some of the relatively technical information about selenium and perhaps share just briefly why that's important. My recollection on this issue, and full disclosure, I am not the scientist in this call, is that selenium is a trace element and it makes its way into the water after the rocks get crushed. Am I remembering that part correctly?
Yes, you are.
And the reason that it's a matter of concern is that in minute amounts, it may not be particularly harmful, but that it's what's called bioaccumulative, meaning over time, it builds up in living creatures. And as it builds up, it can be a source of concern, whether it's for wildlife or for human beings. Am I remembering that part correctly?
You are remembering it well.
All right. Well, thank you. It's 6 years in. It's good that I'm getting that science lesson on a regular basis. So let me say thank you again. I just thought pausing a minute on selenium was important given the significance and the concern that has been raised in the past. So having said thank you to you, let me go to our county council's office. And for those who are not familiar with the county council's office, this is essentially the legal team that represents our county. We have a county council's office of probably, I want to say a couple hundred folks, maybe 100 of whom are attorneys. Among them are Ms. Elizabeth Bianca and Mr. Michael Rossi, who I'm going to let introduce themselves. And then they will be followed by colleagues from the county who work in our county's Department of Environmental Health. But first, let me go to the county council's office and ask you to share whatever information you think would be helpful after brief introductions.
Thank you, Supervisor Simitian. My name is Elizabeth Bianca. I am a lead deputy county counsel in the Office of the County Council. As Supervisor Simitian mentioned, the County Council serves as the legal advisors and attorneys to the County of Santa Clara and the Board of Supervisors. And in that role, we advise county departments, we defend the county in litigation, and we also pursue affirmative litigation on behalf and at the direction of our Board of Supervisors. In my role as a lead deputy county counsel, I am assigned to advise the Department of Planning and Development. And over the last 12 months, myself, along with another teams of attorneys, have continued to advise the department on matters relating to Lehigh. And I am joined this evening by my colleague, lead deputy county counsel, Michael Rossi, who I'll turn over and handles the code enforcement aspects of the Planning and Development Department. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Rossi. I am the lead deputy county counsel over County Council Civil and Code Enforcement Unit. And on behalf of the county, we represent departments that have an enforcement interest in either derived from the county's ordinance code or from state law, where we're a local enforcement agency for that state law. And in that capacity, I advise our Office of Planning and Development and Environmental Health regarding compliance issues with respect to Lehigh Quarry.
All right, thank you both very much. And I should mention that we have two other folks who've joined us from the Cupertino Council, John Willie and Liang Chow. So thank you to you both. And again, just point out to folks who are on the call in the meeting that a lot of different governmental entities and levels of government are engaged and involved. And that's why you see so many different elected officials and or their representatives on the call tonight. Thank you both for being with us. All right, that takes us then, as I mentioned, to the folks at Environmental Health. So why don't I say, Ms. Gaddy, why don't you go first? You'll be followed by Ms. Kahahaina. And after Ms. Kahahaina, we'll go to the folks at County Planning. So Ms. Gaddy, take it away.
Thank you, Supervisor. Good evening. My name is Rochelle Gaddy with the Consumer Protection Division of the Department of Environmental Health, and we enforce the noise sections of the Santa Clara County Ordinance Code. Since 2016, we've been conducting noise monitoring sessions and providing quarterly reports to the Department of Planning and Development. In 2016, we issued one notice of violation. In 2017, we issued 2 notices of violation to Lehigh. And 2018, Lehigh completed sound mitigation projects. And since then, we have not issued a notice of violation. In 2020, we continued with the monitoring reports. And again, no notices of violation have been issued since then. In 2016, we had as many as 32 noise complaints. And that went down to no complaints in 2018, 1 complaint in 2019, and 2020, we received 6 complaints, and we investigated those complaints, and there were no exceedances of the noise limits set forth in the ordinance code. And that's all I have for the noise monitoring program by the Department of Environmental Health.
All right, shall we pass it over then to Jennifer Kahaina?
Hi there, this is Jennifer Kahaina. I'm the Hazardous Materials Program Manager with the Department of Environmental Health. And we are certified by Cal EPA to implement a collection of state hazardous materials and hazardous waste programs, collectively referred to as the Unified Program. We also implement a local hazardous material storage ordinance and toxic gas ordinance. These programs are really focused on preventing the release of industrial chemicals or hazardous materials to the environment and minimizing the impacts of those releases when they occur. So we inspect Lehigh to ensure that they're in compliance with 6 different regulatory programs that we implement, ranging from the underground storage tank program, above ground petroleum storage tanks, hazardous waste generation. There's something called the California Accidental Release Prevention Program for some of the more hazardous chemicals. And in fact, this facility has had to bring on chemicals to help destroy some of the air emissions. It does require the utilization of chemicals, and in that destruction process makes it actually less hazardous. We also implement the Hazardous Material Business Plan program where they disclose hazardous materials that they have on site. And we also regulate them for hazardous materials storage in accordance with our local ordinance. Over the past year, since the last meeting, we've been on site 4 times, 1 for a routine inspection of their underground storage tank program and 3 other times related to hazardous materials construction projects, installing piping and tanks and overseeing, making sure that those elements are appropriately constructed to hold the hazardous materials. This has been a fairly quiet year. We have issued no violations in the last year. There's nothing that is currently open at this time. We have received no complaints since the last meeting. We do have some hazardous materials inspections, some routine inspections that are coming due this year, but the bulk of our inspections are coming due in 2022. So our inspection programs range from every 1 year to every 3 years, depending upon the program that we are inspecting. We do have a couple of open projects that we're continuing to work on related to the installation of piping and some totes for chemicals related to the treatment plant and the relocation of some transformers on the site. So that's about it for the hazardous materials program right now.
Thank you so much. We will come back, I'm sure, to somebody needs to mute, I think. Thanks. We will come back to environmental health, I am sure. I'm going to go next to our county planning department, but before I do, I want to say I see yet another elected who's joined us. Thank you, Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein, for being with us as well tonight. And again, I keep underscoring this because I think it's so noteworthy that folks from not just 1 or 2 communities, but 4 different local governments are here, 4 cities and towns are here to show their interest and to get the updates. So thank you to all 4 communities and their elected representatives. So we have Mr. Eastwood and Mr. Salisbury from the county planning department, both named Rob. So we'll try and sort that out as we go through. Mr. Eastwood, Mr. Salisbury, who'd like to begin?
I'll start, Supervisor Simitian. This is Rob Eastwood. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Great. Good evening. Introduction to our department. We're the Department of Planning Development in the county. We oversee land use in the unincorporated areas, make sure uses conform with zoning and general plan in the county. We have oversight over surface mining operations in the unincorporated area, Lehigh, is located in the unincorporated area. As Supervisor Simitian mentioned, Lehigh was the property in which they currently mine was determined to be vested in 2011. It does not have a use permit for that existing surface mining operation. However, we do have a use permit for the cement plant. It's quite old. It dates back to the 1950s. Separately, we're an entity that implements SMARA, and Supervisor Simitian mentioned that. That's the Surface Mining and Reclamation Act. And the intent of that is if you do conduct surface mining in California, the state and the county wants to ensure that it's reclaimed to a stable state once mining is done. And so the county oversees that program. We have a number of mines we oversee during that process. Lehigh is the biggest surface mine. We hold a financial bond that ensures that the mine will be reclaimed. And if needed, the county would use those financial resources to reclaim the mine if necessary. And we ensure that Lehigh mines and does activity in a way that will allow it to reclaim the site. That's introduction to our broad oversight. Currently, we're overseeing two applications on site. One is what we're calling an expanded mining operation. It's a reclamation plan amendment to allow additional mining on site. And the second is a grading permit to restore Permanente Creek. I'll leave it to Rob Salisbury to provide more details there and some of our other ongoing activities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eastwood. Thank you, Supervisor Simitian. My name is Rob Salisbury. I'm Senior Planner with the County of Santa Clara, and I manage the county's Surface Mines and Reclamation Act program. I also participate in the monthly boots on the ground inspections that Supervisor Simitian mentioned, and manage the financial assurance cost estimate review and project manage both of the reclamation plan amendments in process, the mining expansion rec plan and the Permanente Creek restoration project. In this last year, I've primarily been focusing on the Yeager Yard during the monthly inspections. As the public and the panelists are presumably aware, the county did issue a notice of violation to Lehigh in 2019 for allowing sediment discharge into Permanente Creek. And that violation was abated in middle of 2020 by virtue of Lehigh implementing erosion and sediment control systems. And generally, and they also put in a detention basin at the base of the unstable Yeager Yard slope. And so we've continued to monitor that area. And to give credit where credit is due, Lehigh has done quite a good job of implementing those erosion control devices and working diligently to make improvements to the site such that that sediment discharge ideally will not reoccur. And as I mentioned, we visit the site and the Yeager Yard area specifically on a monthly basis, and there's been no indication of that sediment discharge reoccurring. Other than that, in 2020, we did our annual SMARA inspection, which is mandated by the state, whereby we go out to each facility on an annual basis, make sure that they're in compliance with their approved reclamation plan, and where relevant, compliance with other requirements, and also review the financial assurance cost estimate that, as Rob Eastwood mentioned, is a mechanism whereby the lead agency, in this case the county, can guarantee that a mine site, quarry site, will be reclaimed appropriately. So Lehigh, as required, did submit their financial assurance cost estimate in 2020. We declared it inadequate the first time around, requested some changes that Lehigh did provide, and then we sent that off to the Department of Mine Reclamation for their review. The Department of Mine Reclamation had no comments, and we have now told the Department of Mine Reclamation that we intend to approve the revised face as submitted. And then the other big projects that are going on, as Rob mentioned again, are we have 2 EIRs in process for the 2 reclamation plan amendments that I mentioned previously. So
Salisbury, excuse the interruption. For those who don't know, an EIR is...
Thank you. It's an environmental impact report. So whenever you have a large land use project in California, you have to analyze and evaluate and disclose the likely environmental impacts that would arise from approval of that project. And that is written and then published for public comment. So at the moment we have a final, we have a scope and bid, and we're in the end stages of executing a contract with our EIR consultant for the Permanente Creek Restoration Project environmental impact report. And we are working on the scope and bid for the EIR for the, for lack of a better term, the expansion reclamation plan amendment.
All right, thank you. And you mentioned earlier in your very first remarks something called the Yeager Yard. Could you tell everybody what that is and why it was a source of interest or concern?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Yeager Yard is just a slope of historic mining waste overburden, as it's called by the industry. That's kind of in the southeastern portion of the so-called West Material Storage Area. So it's just quite a large, steep slope of overburden material. And during one brief period of time, there was some seeps coming out of that hillside and picking up sediment, and then that sediment was deposited into Permanente Creek.
All right. Thank you very much to both of the Robs, Rob Eastwood and Rob Salisbury from our County Planning Department. I think what I'd like to do now is go to Mr. Downing, who's been very patient and is here representing the Water District this evening. So let me turn to you, Mr. Downing, and say, what would you like to share with us tonight?
Thank you, Supervisor Simitian. Good evening, everybody. My name is James Downing. I'm a Senior Water Resources Specialist in the Watershed Stewardship and Planning Division for Valley Water, the Santa Clara Valley Water District. And a little about Valley Water: we provide safe, clean drinking water and flood risk reduction and stream stewardship for the county. We own and operate 10 dams and reservoirs of the county, and we have and operate 3 water treatment plants, 1 advanced water purification facility, and we manage about 275 miles of streams. We also have the distinction this evening of probably being the only agency here who does not have regulatory or enforcement authority when it comes to Lehigh, but we do work closely with regulators and municipalities as subject matter experts in the area of water resource management. So when there are problems, we are consulted often, and as it has been, it seems for many of the other panelists here, it has been a relatively quiet year when it comes to Lehigh, but we have had a lot of activity over the hill in Stevens Creek and the Stevens Creek Reservoir. So I know that's not the focus of today, but it's a sort of related topic, as has been mentioned. And so I want to let everyone know that we are definitely doing our due diligence when it comes to the other side of the hill as well.
All right, thank you for that. And let me go finally to Mr. Lee, who is our last panelist, who's going to provide an overview this evening. And Mr. Lee, you, of course, are with the city of Cupertino. And why don't you share with people what your role in this multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional process is. Welcome and thank you again for, ordinarily I would say thank you for hosting us, but tonight I don't get to say that. So thank you, but thank you for being with us.
Yes, and you know we would have hosted. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Supervisor Simitian. I appreciate the opportunity to represent the city on this panel, and also thank the many Cupertino residents that are attending this meeting and for being engaged on the issues. I'm Roger Lee, and I am the Director of Public Works for the city of Cupertino. While the city does not have direct oversight of the Lehigh facility, the Lehigh operations immediately adjacent to Cupertino and the resulting truck traffic through Cupertino have a large impact to the quality of life of our community. These impacts not only affect the west side of Cupertino, but also extend throughout our city, as witnessed by the many regulators on this panel. The city is committed to help represent the concerns of the Cupertino community regarding Lehigh issues to the county and any other regulator as necessary. This past January 19th, the Cupertino City Council conducted a study session to update the community regarding the status of Lehigh Reclamation Plan amendments submitted to the county and the items that are most concerning to our community. The city looks forward to continued coordination with the county and keeping our community informed of all opportunities for public input. I encourage all residents to view the video from this January 19th City Council meeting and to visit the city's webpage on all quarry-related matters. Regarding activities over the last year, there is a small part of a Lehigh parcel that is within the jurisdiction of the city. And many of you may recall that it is on this land that Lehigh conducted unpermitted grading to widen an existing PG&E and CAL FIRE road between their property and the Stevens Creek Quarry property. For the past 12 months, the city has been directing Lehigh on how to correct this unpermitted grading. Most of this road is within the county's jurisdiction, and when the county and the city discovered that the grading was occurring, the county directed Lehigh to cease and desist. And if you recall, this issue was when the Cupertino community started to experience vastly increased truck traffic on city streets between Lehigh and Stevens Creek Quarry. Shortly after the county issuing the cease and desist to Lehigh, the city issued a notice of violation for unpermitted grading and removal of trees to Lehigh. Subsequently, the city has required Lehigh to submit plans to return the road to as close to pre-grading conditions as possible and to restore the trees that have been removed. To date, Lehigh has submitted proposed plans, and if responsive to all city comments, are expected to complete this work this summer. Coordination of this restoration are being coordinated with county planning, and Lehigh has completed the required tree planting. Thank you, Supervisor Smitty.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lee, and thank all of the panelists for the overview. You have certainly covered a lot of ground in a relatively limited period of time. So now we are going to turn to the participants in the audience who have questions. And again, for those who did not submit questions in advance or would like to ask another question, please go to that Q&A function down at the bottom of your screen. And I'm pleased no one has yet wandered over to the raise hand function. Please don't go there. Just go directly to that Q&A function if you have additional questions. I'm going to start with the questions that were submitted in advance, then transition to some of the questions that folks are typing into the Q&A, and we'll get to as many as we can. Some of the panelists have been part of this program in the past, and they know that if I think they need to be prodded ever so graciously to give a more responsive answer, I will prod appropriately, I hope. And also, if the answer is a little bit technical, I may ask them to break it down into language that's a little more easily understood. So let's start with some of the questions. I'm going to start with our county planning team so that they know, and then go to county council. But we have questions for everybody, not to worry. So I am looking through the questions that were received, and Mr. Salisbury, Mr. Eastwood, I'm gonna bundle some questions here together. The first couple are questioner wants to know: is there a plan to close this facility at some point and restore the land? And a related question: what are the plans for habitat restoration and the filling of the quarry pit? So let's start there. Talk about, by what means, and you both alluded to this in your remarks earlier, and certainly I heard that, but I think having a slightly more focused and opportunity to talk about, so, all right, what happens when all or part of the facility is closed? How does it get restored? What are the plans for habitat restoration and the filling of the quarry pit? Mr. Eastwood, you want to begin, or are you going to pass this off to Rob Salisbury?
I'm going to ask Mr. Salisbury to answer.
All right.
Thank you, Supervisor Simitian. Happy to try to answer that. So all quarries are required to have what's called a reclamation plan. And that reclamation plan requires the quarry to have stable slopes, to be protective of water quality, and to revegetate the area that was disturbed by the mining activity. So Lehigh has an approved reclamation plan that was approved by the Board of Supervisors in 2012. And that reclamation plan calls for revegetating the quarry site and for backfilling the main quarry pit. Under the current approved plan, the material for the backfilling of the main pit would come from overburden, that is sort of less valuable rock that's currently stored in the West Material Storage Area. And under the proposed reclamation plan amendment that the the department is currently working on an EIR for, Lehigh is proposing to import clean fill, primarily clean fill, roughly 20 million, cubic yards. And then that material would be used to backfill the main pit. In terms of the lifespan of a quarry, where there is a use permit in place, and then the use permit often specifies the end state for a quarry. But as you alluded to earlier, Supervisor Simitian, Lehigh has vested parcels, meaning as long as they can find mining to those vested parcels, they do not need a use permit. And so any end date is more or less just specified by the current reclamation plan.
And Mr. Salisbury, I'm going to ask you what is obviously a very leading question, but I know it's lurking out there. And in fact, it's not even lurking. It's part of the list of questions I've got here. You mentioned 20 million cubic yards of clean fill is being proposed in the application received from Lehigh as an alternative to using materials that are currently on site. What are the implications of that in terms of truck traffic going in and out of the site?
That importation of fill would require roughly 600 truck trips per day, 5 days a week. And to import that volume of fill, it's going to take roughly 20 years. So 600 truck trips a day, 5 days a week, for 20 to 30 years.
And I'm not trying to be flip here, but I imagine that's going to be the subject of quite a bit of analysis and conversation in the process ahead, yes?
You're absolutely right, not just from a traffic impact standpoint, but also an air quality impact standpoint.
All right. Well, related to that, for both of you gentlemen from county planning, we have another question, which is, what is the status of Lehigh's proposed reclamation plan amendment? Have any specific findings been made at this point?
I'll go ahead and answer that one as well. Thank you, Supervisor Simitian. So where we're at the moment with that reclamation plan amendment, the department did deem the application complete many months ago, and we're now intend to shortly commence preparation of the required environmental impact report. Once the CIR has been prepared and circulated for public comment, the proposed RPA will be brought to the Board of Supervisors for consideration through a public hearing process. And as of now, no specific finding or decisions on the proposed amendment has been made.
All right. Well, you anticipated the third question, which was, could you describe the decision-making process going forward? Let me just ask very directly, though, who makes that decision ultimately about approving or denying the requested reclamation plan amendment?
Well, under our county zoning ordinance, normally the planning commission would be the body responsible for approving or denying a reclamation plan amendment. But in the case of Lehigh, they have a ridgeline protection easement in place that they granted to the county back in 1972. And part of Lehigh's proposal is to mine the ridgeline, necessitating an amendment to that ridgeline protection easement. And any amendment to any easement held by the county requires approval by the Board of Supervisors. And as a result, the entire reclamation plan and the proposed easement amendment will go before the Board of Supervisors.
All right. And the last question for the moment is, what's the timeline on all that? When do you expect that a final decision might be made? And I know that that's a tough question to answer, so let me try it this way. Is this likely to be resolved in the next 18 months?
No, I think it'll be coming before the Board of Supervisors probably in the tail end of 2022.
Okay. And that's in part because this environmental review process takes some time, yes?
That is exactly correct. Yes, it takes quite a bit of time to prepare an EIR. And then, of course, there's a public comment period after the EIR has been prepared and circulated. And then only after that period would it go before the Board of Supervisors.
All right. Thank you very much. Let me jump over to our folks at County Council. After I tease Mr. Eastwood from County Planning for managing to let you answer all those questions, Mr. Salisbury, so good for him. But let me go over to County Council. This is our legal team. And we've got 3 questions that I'd like to posed to either or both of you. The first one is, can the county simply refuse to process any changes or expansion of vested rights? Ms. Bianca, I'll go to you and let you begin with that one if you like.
Certainly. The county processes Lehigh's application for a reclamation plan amendment like it would process any other application. And so we are not in a position from county planning to refuse to process the application that's set forth in the reclamation plan amendment.
All right, I'm going to take that as a no to the question, can the county simply refuse to process any changes or expansion of vested rights? Did I get that right?
Correct.
All right,
Correct.
so it could conceivably be approved or denied, but if someone files the application and they file a complete application, it gets processed. Is that the bottom line?
Correct.
All right. Well, then the follow-up question from one of our participants is, could voters simply decide to rescind the vested rights? So the Board of Supervisors, and again, forgive me, I'm going to point out this was before I came back on the Board of Supervisors, back in 2011, made a determination about vested rights. And the questioner wants to know, well, is that something that the voters could overturn by a vote of the public? Can they rescind the vested rights determination?
The answer to that is no. One way of thinking about the vested rights determination is it's a quasi-judicial determination of sorts. So similar to the voters not being able to overturn decisions of a court, it's not a decision that can be overturned by the voters or referendumed by the voters.
Okay. And Ms. Bianca, I'm going to spend a minute with you, if I may, on this issue of quasi-judicial, which I'm sure is a term that has a lot of our participants furrowing their foreheads. So, you know, those of us who are elected officials, in this case, 5 elected members of the Board of Supervisors, are used to being asked to serve in a legislative function to pass laws and exercising their best judgment, obviously listening to the public. You're describing a different process that you're calling quasi-judicial. Does that mean that the 5 members of the Board of Supervisors sit almost like judges in terms of applying the facts to the law?
That's correct. It is a different role than a policy-making role, and it is one where they're looking at the law and they're looking at the facts and making a determination.
Okay, and so does that mean, and you know, you're our attorney, so you'll decide what's appropriate to answer, but does that mean there is somewhat less discretion in a quasi-judicial role than there would be if this was a, quote, legislative matter?
Yes.
All right. Well, let's shift the topic of conversation. Somebody wants to know, what are the facts regarding Lehigh's filing suit against the county? So this is somebody who has read the newspaper apparently and saw that Lehigh has recently filed a legal complaint against Santa Clara County. What can you and would you like to share in connection with that set of issues?
Certainly, the county has been served with a complaint that has been filed by Lehigh. We have been served today, and we're not in a position, it's pending litigation at this time, to share other than they're looking at work related to the current reclamation plan amendment. But we're currently in the process of reviewing the complaint and also determining the appropriate response for the county.
All right. Is it fair to say that Lehigh says we're not following the rules and we think we are as a county?
I think that's a good description and summary of the case.
That's my effort to summarize a 27-page complaint that I've read. So that was the and still not make you anxious. So that was my goal, Ms. Bianca. All right. For the city of Cupertino, Mr. Lee, somebody has a very direct question, which is, and I may go to the county planning folks as well. What's the status of the access road within the city's jurisdiction between the Lehigh and Stevens Creek Quarry properties? So what's the status of that access road? You mentioned this briefly, Mr. Lee, but what's the current situation there?
Yes, Supervisor Simitian, we're waiting on Lehigh to submit updated plans that are responsive to our comments, and we expect that the restoration could occur yet this summer.
Okay. Is there, let me follow up just a little bit, even though I think I know the answers, but for folks who are on the call, there were trucks moving back and forth before, and then the road was shut down and that truck traffic moved to your city streets. Am I remembering this all correctly?
It's not a good memory, but that's correct.
All right. There are no longer trucks moving back and forth over that access road between Lehigh and Stevens Creek. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And there's no longer the truck traffic on the city streets because there was an end put to that. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, that's right.
All right. So that's the current status, and you're waiting for restoration of the area that involved the access road as we speak. County planning, what else can you tell us about that issue of the access road and the resulting traffic?
Not much to add, except that a portion of the access road is in the county's jurisdiction. And so under Lehigh's proposed reclamation plan amendment, the area within the county where that access road was widened without permit, that is covered under the reclamation plan amendment and will be reclaimed with the rest of the quarry should this amendment get approved.
Mr. Salisbury, when you say that's covered under the reclamation plan amendment, and again, that's a reclamation plan amendment proposal or application, does that mean that Lehigh is asking yet again to use that access road for moving material back and forth across the boundary between Lehigh and Stevens Creek?
Yeah, that is correct. In their application, they actually are asking for permission to either utilize the existing access road, a portion of which crosses into Cupertino's jurisdiction, or establish a new access road linking Lehigh and Stevens Creek Quarry that is entirely within county jurisdiction property.
All right, thank you. I think between the two of you, you've done a great job of fleshing that out. Environmental health. Here's a good broad question that lets you answer as little or as much as you would like in some respects, which is, what's happening on the noise front? That's what one of our questioners wants to know. What's happening on the noise front?
We have been continuing our monitoring activities at the plant, and we have not recorded a violation or an exceedance. And so at this time, it's relatively quiet on the noise front for Lehigh.
Ms. Gaddy, when was the last time you were, and now I'm following up here on behalf of the questioner, when was the last time you had a noise violation at the site?
That was in 2017. There were 2 notices of violation that were issued for 3 occurrences of exceedances of the noise limits.
All right. Thank you for that. And let me go now to the folks at the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, also known by some as BACMed. And let me just ask on behalf of the questioner, the questioner wants to know, well, how is Lehigh held accountable for air emissions? Do we have reports or data to verify compliance? And if there have been violations, are they, do we have enough in the way of data or report information to stop any illegal behavior? So let me go to the BACMed Bay Area Air Quality Management District and say, how do you all hold Lehigh accountable for their air emissions? Do you have reports? Do you have data to verify compliance? And do you have what you need so that you can stop behavior that's not permitted if and when it happens?
So the answer is yes. And let me just clarify. Lehigh has allowed air emissions. They have lots and lots of air emissions, but what we're dealing with are violations of the air emission standards. So we have a regulation, and if there are emission standards within that regulation and they exceed those standards, then we will issue a notice of violation. if there are, and we can do that through records, reviewing record keeping. We can do that, for instance, through source test. And that's certainly a way of determining violations. So these are methods that we can use to determine violations. We'll issue notices of violation. Is that sufficient to persuade them from not doing that in the future? Well, it's a good question. We certainly have penalties for non-compliance, and we try to develop penalties that will persuade them from violating our rules and regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Marvin. Let me just follow up a little bit. You mentioned that you can use data from records that Lehigh keeps and maintains, that you can also do measurements at the source. Has your agency actually done either or both of those things in the last year or two?
The answer is yes, of course. During inspections, we will go over the logs and record keeping logs that are for each of the sources that have permit conditions or record keeping requirements that can determine compliance. For our source testing, the facility is required to conduct source testing on a yearly basis, both conducting a relative accuracy test, that's just to see if the instruments are accurate, and also an actual source test. And of course, we go and we review those source tests for compliance. Have they done that this year? No, they haven't been operating this year. So at least since the end of April. So they haven't done a source test. But yes, in the past couple of years before that, of course, we have been reviewing their source test records.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me go to the water board then and ask sort of a comparable question on the water issues. The question is, how is Lehigh held accountable for toxic waste emitted into the water? How is Lehigh held accountable for toxic waste emitted into the water? And is it sufficient to stop illegal behavior?
I think so. So earlier I mentioned those two permits, which set forth the requirements that Lehigh has to comply with. Those permits have monitoring requirements. They have reporting requirements. Those reports and monitoring data need to get submitted to the water board, and we review those. And we also go out on site and inspect the facility ourselves. And if there are problems, then we follow up with enforcement actions. And as I said, it's been a quiet year, and so we haven't had any need for enforcement in the last year.
And Mr. Johnson, before I go to the water district with the next question, which I'm going to do, I do think this might be a good time just to clarify. One of the questions we have from a participant is, what's the difference between the water district and the water board again, please?
Well, the water board is a state agency. So we're part of the California Environmental Protection Agency. And so, and our responsibility is actually to protect water quality in the water. So we're talking about the groundwater and the surface water. My agency's responsibility has nothing to do with, well, I don't want to say nothing to do with drinking water, because we have to protect the water for use for drinking water, but it's not our responsibility to provide, for instance, drinking water to anyone.
All right, so let me ask you this question, and if you want to send it off to the water district, we'll let you. But the questioner wants to know, can the selenium, which we discussed previously, can the selenium released at Lehigh get into the groundwater and then into local drinking water?
I think it would. I'm going to give a quick answer, and if somebody else wants to follow up with a more detailed answer, that would be fine. But my understanding is that there's actually more than one aquifer underneath the Lehigh facility, and the drinking water that people use, or the aquifer that people use for drinking water, is actually below the aquifer that the water percolating from the site would go into. So there's actually a barrier between there. And so no, the selenium that goes into the groundwater would not affect drinking water. That said, we're going to make sure that part of our agency's responsibility is actually to protect that upper aquifer, to make sure that somebody could drink that water if somebody wanted to. And so our regulations and our requirements are aimed at doing that, even if people aren't actually drinking that water.
All right, I'm going to go to Mr. Downing over at the Water District and see what his take on this is. And again, for the Water District now, the question is, can selenium released at Lehigh get into the groundwater and then into local drinking water?
Well, Mr. Johnson has described it well, and if you'll forgive that phrasing, but the Valley Water has monitored or reviewed rather all of the monitoring data from the wells within 4 miles of Lehigh, and has found no indication of elevated levels of selenium or other pollutants in the water extracted from those wells. So if there is selenium that's escaping from the quarry, it is not making it into those wells.
Okay. Next question is for the folks at the EPA, US EPA, and the question is, what emissions reduction devices are required to be installed at the Cupertino facility? So what emission reduction devices will actually be installed or required to be installed at the Cupertino facility? And specifically, has the SNCR been installed and is it operational? Let's go to the US EPA.
Yes. So as we kind of mentioned earlier during the brief introduction, we're trying to get the bad stuff out of the air. So the nitrogen oxides and the sulfur dioxides, they contribute to a variety of health problems and adverse environmental problems such as ozone, acid rain, global warming, water quality deterioration, as well as visual impairment because of high particulate matter. And so for NOx, the nitrogen oxides, there's no additional controls that are needed because the selective non-catalytic reduction system is already installed at the Cupertino facility. The facility is required to reduce their NOx from their current limit of 2.3 pounds per ton of clinker, or their processing, to 2.0 pounds per ton of clinker. So that's 0.3 of a reduction that we're expecting once the facility is operational. Because my understanding is the kiln at Cupertino, as John Marvin already mentioned, is still on extended shutdown. And in regards to the sulfur dioxides, they're expected to install a lime injection system. And so for the lime injection system, Lehigh, per the consent decree, was required to submit a protocol to EPA, which they did on January 17th, and it's currently under review, to set up a test and set protocol. And what test and set really means is that we're trying to test the emissions so we can get the lowest or the most stringent emission limit for the sulfur dioxides. And this process has been used for a variety of facilities, be it cement plants, glass plants, even refinery settlements. So it's across the agency. And so I think overall we are working with Bay Area because the LIC, so the lime injection system, the LIS, will be required to be permitted from Bay Area. And so the second part of your question is the SNCR installed? Yes, it is installed. That was already at the facility.
And would you tell everybody again what SNCR stands for?
Selective non-catalytic reduction. So it's I shouldn't say it's it's a method that's used to convert nitrogen dioxide into nitrogen and water. So it's another form of reducing NOx in the air. And I can also point to Robert Cave, who has been a technical person from Bay Area on this consent decree. So Robert, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I would just say the selective non-catalytic reduction system was installed back when, as a result of our regulations in 2012 that I mentioned previously. And like Rosni said, it's a system which controls emissions of NOx by injecting ammonia into the kiln gas. They just need to tweak that system a little bit to lower the amount of NOx that's being emitted to meet the requirements of the consent decree. The facility also has a lime injection system that was designed to control emissions of other pollutants. And so there's some thought that they can make some modifications to that system to control SO2, because SO2 is also controlled by a lime injection system, but they're going to have to do some kind of modifications. And the test and set protocol is designed to allow the facility to try out different scenarios to try to meet the greatest possible reduction of SO2. There is a backstop limit that's included in that they have to reduce their emissions down to 2.1 pounds per ton of clinker, I believe, and then try to go further. So there is a reduction that they're required to meet that's about partway through the test and set protocol that they'll be required to meet that limit, and then they'll have to demonstrate that they can go even further or demonstrate that they can't, but this will be reviewed by EPA and then approved and develop a final limit for SO2 emissions.
All right. Thank you all. We have a couple of questions which may be rhetorical, but I want to make sure we get them just into the record and acknowledge that they were asked. If anybody wants to lean in, feel free. We'll just pause a moment. But the one question is, what's the impact on the construction industry of Lehigh going out of business? And somebody else, or perhaps the same questioner, asks, how do we replace the product they produced? Where would it come from? And there's a third question that I'll hold off on, but anybody care to comment on those? Those are largely sort of business and economic development questions.
All right, but I don't have an answer. I think those are more industry questions. I'm just trying to think of the other agencies and ourselves. So I just wanted to say I don't think we have an answer for that question.
All right. The third question is, what will Supervisor Simitian do to ensure construction projects continue at full speed in our county? And, I was actually going to, in some respects, I think, address that sort of general topic at the end, and I probably will take the opportunity to mention it again. But when people ask me what my position on these issues is, I always say, it's simple. I think operators should follow the law, and I think the regulatory agencies should do their job. It's really pretty direct. So, in terms of ensuring that projects move forward, my view is my responsibility as an elected official to do my job thoroughly, fairly, and expeditiously, but not rushing things in a way that precludes gathering the necessary environmental impact report information, or that precludes meaningful public participation. So I'll let it go at that for now. And what I want to do, having said that, is go to our questions that have been submitted tonight. And we've got a question from one of our participants who wants to know, when will the kiln be put back in operation? Anyone in the call, anyone on our panel able to answer that question? County planning, do you have any indication from Lehigh what their expectation is? Let's try it that way.
I'll ask Rob to let us know. I know Lehigh had told us previously that they were reducing operations, and I think the community is observing that, but I'm not sure if we have plans from them on when they are putting the kiln back into operation. Rob, do you have more information on that?
Unfortunately, no, I do not.
All right. Is it fair to say that's a business decision that Lehigh will make, and that's what we know?
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. We have another question who says, how long are the current permits, and what are the prospects for non-renewal? I think I'll just limit the question to how long are the current permits, and how would you describe that, county planning?
Well, as we mentioned previously, sorry, Rob, Lehigh, as a vested quarry, operates without a use permit. So there is no permit to quote unquote expire. They have a reclamation plan amendment that anticipates mining will be conducted for a certain length of time. But with an amendment to a reclamation plan, there's nothing that prevents them from extending that time frame should economic and other factors make it worthwhile to do so.
Mr. Salisbury, let me ask you, or County Council, is there the potential for an amendment approval to be time limited if that were the will of a majority of the Board of Supervisors?
This is Elizabeth Pianka from County Council. So what is issued by the county is a reclamation plan amendment, and that establishes a time frame for reclamation of the property, and that's based on a number of different factors. It's a very large site, and it's it cannot be reclaimed overnight. It takes time. And there is always the opportunity in the future if needed. And as we see today with the 2019 Reclamation Plan Amendment for Lehigh to amend yet again, which would effectively extend the term of the reclamation plan.
Okay. We've got a question from someone who says, I live within about a mile of the Cupertino mining operations for the last 35 years. I've not seen any trouble. And in fact, I'm happy to see construction materials flowing into our county. This company is important and we need elected officials to work to keep them operating. Will you commit to resolving all roadblocks? And here's what I would say to the questioner as one of the 5 county supervisors who may ultimately have to vote on this. And that is, it's not a question of picking sides. As you heard from Ms. Pianka earlier, it's actually what we call a quasi-judicial decision. And that means that the obligation is to be fair in the application of the law to the facts that are presented in an application. And, no matter what my colleagues or I may think, we are obliged to follow the law, and I fully expect that folks will do that. Certainly, as I said, my job is to keep an open mind right up until the last moment, keep listening to people as they share their opinions and evidence in the application process. And that's going to be frustrating, by the way, for many members of the public and for me, because I'm a person who happy to share his opinion most of the time. And certainly the public likes to have a clear sense of what the opinions of their elected officials may be. But I understand this process and I've been through it before on other projects of significance, and follow the law, follow the rules, and that's my commitment to both the questioner and you all. So we have another question, which is, what are the environmental screening levels for imported fill for this and any site within Santa Clara County for various types of contaminants, all contaminants? And is there a link that somebody could provide that would actually say, here are the criteria or the limits or the levels that are allowed? So I don't know if this is a planning question or an environmental health question. Ms. Kahina, is this your department when we're talking about what kinds of contaminants can be in a imported fill?
I know we see this on our site mitigation sites, but not with regard to this reclamation plan. So I would refer this to planning first.
All right. Planning?
I'm happy to.
Go ahead, Rob.
So the county zoning ordinance and the county ordinance code doesn't really specify specifically screening levels for imported fill. In the case of Lehigh's proposed use of imported fill, my understanding is that primarily would be the Regional Water Quality Control Board that would be monitoring and providing screening level thresholds for the imported fill. Primarily to make sure that the fill is protective of water quality.
I'm going to be a little bit silly to make a point, Mr. Salisbury. Rather obviously, if it were radioactive waste, we wouldn't let it be used. Is that a fair statement on my part to make?
Yes.
Okay. Where would that be written down in the process so people know, okay, they're not going to bring that in?
Well, certainly the question of imported fill and the overall level of safety that's represented by that proposal is going to have to be evaluated through as part of the EIR. And certainly if such a proposal would be approved, there would be conditions of approval that would flesh out and specify exactly how that importation protocol would work.
Okay, so it is possible, and I understand you're not one of the 5 voting board members, but it's possible that if imported fill were to be permitted, that the conditions of approval could put some limitation on or definition around what would be acceptable fill in that case. Did I get that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, then we've got a comment really, but it comes with a question. One of our participants says, when I registered, the dialogue box asked attendees to either enter a question or provide a comment. Our family chose to provide a comment. How will our feedback be captured and recorded for future reference, as we hope it will be? And let me just assure the questioner and the commenter that I will review all of these after tonight's meeting as one of the 5 county supervisors, and I should underscore just one of the 5 county supervisors who will be working on these issues. But we will also share comments with, depending on the comment, with the appropriate agency if it is specific to an appropriate agency. And if it's generic, we will share it with all of the agencies who have participated tonight. So thank you for the comment as well. And the question again is, how will those comments be dealt with? And the answer is they will be certainly reviewed by me in my office, but they'll also go to the appropriate agency or agencies plural. And I do want to underscore something as I have sometimes in the past, and that is important to remember that there are 5 county supervisors. In most instances, that means it takes 3 votes for our board to take an action. Sometimes what's called a supermajority, meaning 4 people might be required. But the other thing to remember is that we use a district election system. So there are 5 district elected supervisors, each one of whom represents roughly 400,000 folks in the county. The Lehigh facility is in my district, which is one of the reasons why I'm hosting this town hall again, yet again this year. But all 5 supervisors have the same 1 vote when it comes time to make a decision. And notwithstanding the fact that the facility is in the district I represent, as opposed to the different geographies that my colleagues represent. All right. Let's see here. And an air quality question. It comes with a comment, and I'll do a little fact checking if I can with the folks from the air quality district. It says, given that the Lehigh facility is one of California's biggest air polluters, ahead of refineries, ranking number 2 for sulfur oxides and number 3 for hydrochloric acid and number 4 for particulate matter, 2.5, and number 6 for volatile organic compounds, VOCs, and number 7 for nitrogen oxides, and number 10 for hexavalent chromium. Forgive me, it's a long question. What are the chances that the county will simply discontinue their permit in order to protect public health as well as the environment? Let me first go to the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. Did those numbers sound right? I know I threw a lot of them at you very quickly.
I don't have that information, so I can't verify that.
All right. What I'm going to say to the questioner, and also highlight for my own staff who's monitoring the meeting and handling the logistics tonight, is we'll take that question and do our best to get an answer to whether or not those assertions are correct, and we'll post it. I feel an obligation to do that since I've now read the statement / question into the record. And then this goes at the real heart of the question here was, what are the chances that the county will discontinue their permit in order to protect public health as well as the environment? Mr. Rossi, we haven't tossed one your way yet, and I think this is an ideal one to toss your way since I know you do a lot of work in the enforcement arena. You know, more colloquially, I think the question is asking, what does somebody have to do to get their approval yanked? What would you tell them?
Well, what I would say, Supervisor Simitian, and thank you for the question, is that the county generally investigates complaints of violations. And if we confirm that there's a violation, we issue a notice of violation. And that notice of violation comes with it the opportunity for the violator to correct the confirmed violation. If they correct the confirmed violation within a time certain, we don't invoke any administrative penalties. I think that Rob Salisbury actually mentioned earlier that the last NOV that we issued to Lehigh was in 2019, and then the county gave Lehigh the opportunity to come into compliance, which they did in 2020. So depending on the nature of the violation, the seriousness of the violation, we allow the violator to come into compliance without immediate penalties.
And Mr. Rossi, I'm going to go back and forth with you a little bit here, so please bear with me. And when you say NOV, that's a notice of violation, yes?
Yes, thank you.
And that is a determination. That's not just, hey, we need to talk. That's a determination somebody has made that there is in fact a violation, yes?
That's correct. When county staff determines there's a violation, they will issue the notice of violation. The party accused of committing the violation has a due process right to challenge that violation before the county hearing officer, which is an impartial third party that serves the county to adjudicate alleged violations. But generally speaking, the abatement process is more frequently used than the appeals process.
And the question that always comes up, and it's come up again tonight, I just noticed, but it always comes up, which is, well, you know, does that mean that they can violate standards? They or any other property owner could violate standards, receive notices of violation, and sort of just keep doing that indefinitely without being put out of business? Or is there some point at which you say, you know what, these folks are so significantly out of compliance that requires them to be shut down? And what's that about? How does that work? What's the standard? Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. So generally speaking, the Santa Clara County Ordinance Code actually requires that there's an abatement period. So in most cases, violators do come into compliance within those abatement periods because they don't want to suffer the consequences, generally financial consequences for violation. In the context of quarries, I should also mention that under SMARA, under the Surface Mining and Reclamation Act, if a cited violation will take longer than the county's relatively short corrections periods, which is generally speaking is 30 days to correct, they can enter into a stipulated order to comply and have a longer amount of time to come into compliance.
But forgive me, I'm going to keep pushing on this because I think it's the core question here that we need to be able to give a clear answer to folks on. But you know, okay, so they could pay a fine or they could come into compliance again. But I think the way the question goes is, do you mean they get to keep breaking, they or anybody else? I don't want to make this specific to this particular property. Right. They could continue to break the law over and over and over again and not be put out of business because every time they get a notice of violation, they say, okay, we're sorry, and they fix it?
No, we have the ability to take recalcitrant violators to court, and we often do. When we have serial violators that refuse to come into compliance and they won't abide by the county's orders, we will take them before a court and have the court make the order.
And the court make the order to remedy the problem or to put somebody out of business?
generally speaking, because the process is a little bit different with quarries, but generally speaking, the court will enjoin the party from undertaking certain actions if that's what we request, and to levy financial penalties as well. But it's not an either or question. Just because you pay administrative fine doesn't alleviate you. That doesn't relieve you of the obligation to follow the law.
All right, well, I'm going to try it this way, and folks, please bear with me, because I think this is an important point. And I'm going to look at Mr. Lee, and I want to say, Mr. Lee, I'm using you just because you're in the upper right-hand corner of my screen. This is not a true hypothetical. But if Mr. Lee got a traffic ticket for speeding, he'd go to court, pay the fine. But at some point, if he got enough points on his driver's license, they'd yank his driver's license away, yes?
That's correct.
Okay, so the questioner wants to know, is there a point at which effectively the county can yank somebody's driver's license, or in this case, the ability to operate a facility of this sort in the unincorporated county?
So within the specific context of quarries, if a quarry does not come into compliance, we can impose administrative penalties for up to $5,000 per day. But beyond that, we can seek a quarry's removal from the Division of Mine Reclamation, which allows them to obtain government contracts. They can lose the ability to bid for those contracts and receive those contracts. And if the violations are serious enough, we can seek a court order to enjoin operation.
Okay, and that I do want to underscore, because you are reminding us all that I forget the code section. Somebody might want to shout it out here on the panel that deals with the state contracts. But essentially what you're saying is, if somebody is such a bad actor on a consistent level, that we can appeal to the state to have them removed from the list of folks eligible to perform on such contracts. And the financial implications of that removal are so great as to actually compel good behavior. Did I get that part right?
Yes, you did. That's Public Resources Code 2717B, actually.
Of course it is. Thank you for that. I think it's helpful for people to know that there are remedies out there, because, as much as it's a challenge, there are tools out there if things get to that hand. And you're telling us that if at some point somebody's behavior gets so bad, so repeatedly, that repeated notices of violation are insufficient to change behavior, that we could then go to court, but that's an extraordinary case. Is that a fair summary?
It's an extraordinary case, but one that we would certainly be willing to do under the right circumstances.
All right, I've burned up a lot of the time on that. I apologize, but I do think it was a question that people wanted as clear an answer as we could provide. We got a question from somebody who says, pardon my lack of knowledge, but is there a detailed restoration and recovery plan for the site? And if so, whatever its form, where is it located? Is it available online? Thank you. So let me go to planning and say, okay, there is an existing reclamation plan. Yes, planning?
Yes, there is.
And if a member of the community wanted to see it, is it available online if they went to the planning department site?
Yes, it is.
And is that an address you could put in the chat box?
Absolutely.
All right. And now that I know you can, will you?
Yes, I will. I'll do
All
so
right.
right
Thank
now.
you. Thank you. See, we're pushing the accountability here tonight. Thank you, Ms. Salisbury. All right. So to the questioner, yes, there is a plan. The plan is available online, and you should be able to access it from the address that you're going to see shortly. And if, let me just say to the questioner, if you get stuck, please feel free to call my office at 408-299-5050, and we'll try and make sure you get unstuck. For legal, and I'll go to Ms. Pianka, we talked on this a little bit before, but I think it's sort of a key question for a lot of people. Can the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors legally make a new or different determination on vested rights before Lehigh invests large sums in a new mine? And if not, why not? And Ms. Pianka, I think, I'm going to read in between the lines here a little bit, and I hope that's okay. I think the questioner is saying, look, the Board of Supervisors made this determination in the first place back in 2011. Can't the Board of Supervisors say we're going to make a new and different determination now?
No, the Board of Supervisors in 2011 made a determination on the geographic scope of Lehigh's vested rights. It's a final determination of the board. It was litigated and there was a final court judicial determination. And it's not something that our Board of Supervisors would be in the position to take up at this time.
All right. Very practical question, and I'm going to go to my own staff here, Christina. It says, will the slides be shared with those who registered? The easy answer I would give is the whole presentation tonight will be shared online. It'll be on my website. Anything else, Christina, that you want to add to that clarifies that?
No, I would just say that we can certainly post the slides, to your website. No problem.
All right. Why don't we commit to doing that then for the questioner, in addition to the 2-hour program tonight being available on my site, which is supervisorsimitian.org. We'll pull out the slides so you don't have to make your way through the whole 2 hours in order to get them. Thank you for that, Christina. All right. Then we've got a comment and question that says, there is always black dust settling on our parked cars and outdoor items. What is being done to control cement and dust particles along residential truck routes on Stevens Creek Boulevard? So we've talked about the fact that there's a quarry, and we've talked about the fact that there's a cement plant, but the questioner is really going to the issue of dust that's settling on parked cars and other outdoor items. Specifically, it seems in connection with trucks along residential routes on Stevens Creek Boulevard. Anyone able to comment on that? Mr. Lee, I seem to remember that we had a fair amount of conversation about this when there was all that truck traffic after the initial closure of the access road. What's your recollection, if I can put you on the spot for just a minute, sir?
Supervisor Smitty, regarding just the dust collecting on their vehicles?
Well, the issue of truck traffic along Stevens Creek Boulevard.
Well, the traffic itself, I mean, it's regulated by the vehicle code. The sheriff is out there routinely monitoring the truck traffic. We are not able to prohibit the trucks from using city streets as long as they're following the vehicle code. They're in compliance and they're following all the laws. So to the extent of that, I know that the planning, they could speak about any truck restrictions that may be in place there.
Let me go to them then in a moment, but to underscore what you've just said, and thank you, Mr. Lee, in Cupertino, law enforcement is provided through a contract with the county sheriff's office. The county sheriff's office then, acting as the local police agency, has responsibility for law enforcement and traffic enforcement along these city streets, yes?
Yes.
All right, then the follow-up question to the county planning staff is, in addition to the enforcement of vehicle code provisions and any local ordinances, is there anything built into the system that limits this truck traffic in any way? The concern in this questioner's case appears to be about dust, but I'm sure there are a range of issues associated with truck routes that we hear about.
I'm happy to...
Go ahead, Mr. Salisbury.
Thank you, Supervisor Simitian. As a result of Lehigh being a vested quarry, they do not have a use permit. And a use permit is a primary vehicle that the planning office uses to regulate both truck volume, number of truck trips, and truck routes. So for Stevens Creek Quarry, they have a truck limit and they have an approved truck route. Because Lehigh does not have a use permit or need a use permit for their quarry operation, and because the use permit for the cement plant is so old, there are no truck limits or truck routes associated with those, with their use permit for the cement plant.
And is that one of the things that we live with by virtue of the vested rights determination?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Ms. Pianka, quick question. What's the status of the legal action by Lehigh against the county? So the we talked earlier about the fact that there had been a complaint filed. What's the status of all that?
The complaint was served on the county today, and the county has a time period to respond. We'll be responding in April, and then it will proceed along a path of a judicial determination. The complaint was filed in Santa Clara County Superior Court, and so the first step is a determination by the Superior Court. And then parties may appeal that determination. So those are the next steps. And the county is still evaluating how it will respond. Thank you.
All right. We have a long question from Eddie V. And let me just say, forgive me, but time just does not permit us to wade into that question. But I'll just highlight it for my staff as one that we'll want to respond to after we wrap up and see if we can't get an answer up online at the earliest opportunity. And then we've got a question, again, with in the context of a comment first. One of the key concerns among the public is the impact of the quarry on the aesthetic quality of the area. So we've talked about water, air quality, we've talked about soils, we've talked about dust, but this is a question that focuses on the aesthetic quality of the area. And the questioner goes on to say, simply the character of the views of the mountains. In addition to the environmental health and quality, air and water quality issues and their regulation, how does the regulatory process deal with the impact of the operations on the site, e.g. mining, engage with this critical public concern? So, Ms. Pianco or somebody from county planning, as the review process unfolds, what is the place of these aesthetic considerations in the process? Let me put it to you that way.
I'll jump in, Rob Eastwood, since Mr. Salisbury's been answering most of the questions. I can think of two fronts, Supervisor Simitian, as mentioned earlier, I think by yourself and Mr. Salisbury, the county owns a scenic easement over a current ridgeline above Permanente Quarry, and that acts as a protection and buffer to ensure that ridgeline remains in place. And so to answer the question, that was the direct intent of that easement, was to ensure at least that scenic quality of the ridgeline is maintained. Lehigh has now requested to modify it. Of course, that's up to the Board of Supervisors if they would allow that modification, but that is one decision point in which that would be reviewed. Under SMARA, when the site is reclaimed, it has to be reclaimed to standards where the site is stable and revegetated. So that doesn't specifically answer during mining aesthetic impacts. Again, Lehigh is a vested quarry. They don't need a use permit to mine, but in accordance with SMARA requirements to reclaim the site, it has to be reclaimed to a state where it mimics or uses revegetation to restore to an open space or revegetated hillside.
All right, thank you for that. And we have a question, and I think this is for Ms. Kahaina. What hazardous materials are being monitored? So Ms. Kahaina, earlier you were kind enough to say, hey, we're in the hazardous materials monitoring business. So what hazardous materials are we talking about here?
Sure. So there are several of them out there, and probably too many to list. There are requirements in California to identify chemicals that are present on site that are hazardous over 500 pounds, 200 cubic feet, or 55 gallons. So we only get to see some of these that are disclosed to us. They've got 18 regulated sites that have between 1 and 53 chemicals for each of those sites. So it's probably better to talk about it in general terms. We know that they have raw materials that go into the product itself. We know that there could be some grinding aids that help them grind the materials. They have a variety of fuels, so gasoline, diesel, pet coke, propane. They have oils, greases, all kinds of lubricants. They have cleaning chemicals. They operate a laboratory. They also have brought on site some chemicals for the control of their air emissions, such as the lime or calcium hydroxide and the ammonium hydroxide. They've got calibration gases. So it's a wide variety of things that they have on site that we're taking a look at. When we do a complete site walk of their facility, it can easily take us over a week to get to all of the different aspects of their facility. But we do come on site for inspections of certain portions of their site that are more hazardous and have more monitoring, such as their underground storage tank where they have fuels.
All right. Thank you for that. We have really, the range of questions is just always fascinating to me. The questioner wants to know, does Lehigh pay for the abnormal wear and tear on the surrounding city roads? Anybody?
No, they do not.
All right. That being said, presumably they pay gas taxes and that to the extent that we have sales taxes that are part of the process of funding road repair. I'm sure if they had a representative speaking tonight, that would be the point they want to make. But Mr. Lee, your bottom line answer is no, there is no special payment for abnormal wear and tear on the surrounding city roads.
That's correct. Nothing in addition to what you noted.
All right, good. Then so, Mr. Salisbury, this one's yours, and you just popped up on my screen, and we're going to make this the last question because I want to respect everybody's time, in spite of the fact that we have just scores of questions that we could get to if we had more time. It says, regarding the possibility of 600 truck trips per day, what are the names of the streets that will be impacted?
Well, at the moment, we have not done the traffic study or a traffic study. So
and of course, I knew that when I asked you the question, but I asked you the question anyway, because it gives me the chance, Mr. Salisbury, to say, when there is an environmental impact report for the application, if there is discussion of truck trips, that discussion will include an assessment of where those truck trips would take place, would it not?
To the maximum extent possible, yes.
All right, understanding that there may be some lack of precision given the limitations of the process. All right, I'm going to say that at this point, I should say thank you. We're just a couple of minutes away from 8:30, and we are really very close to running out of time. So thank you to all of the panelists. Your presence was really essential to the success of the evening, and I think what I'll do is just ask everybody to join me in a virtual round of applause tonight for taking their time to be here. Also want to thank those of you who showed up tonight to hear about the recent actions taken by the various regulatory agencies and get your questions answered. As I say, the combination of large numbers of participants tonight, plus the questions from prior to the event, mean that there were just an awful lot of questions we could not get to. So I will ask my staff to work to get as many of them as possible. Can't get them all probably, but as many as possible up on our website. That'll take a little time simply because there are so many and we got a lot of different folks to go to if we're going to get you good answers. So please be patient with us, but we will get as many of them as possible. And again, I want to underscore what I said earlier in response to one of the questions. You know, whenever I am asked as an elected official, as a county supervisor, sort of what do I think about all this? As I say, I think, as is the case with every business, we expect the businesses to follow the law. And with respect to the regulatory agencies, including our own county, we expect the regulatory agencies to do their job vigorously, but fairly. So I hope that you leave the conversation tonight feeling a little bit more assured that the alphabet agency, the alphabet soup of public agencies that we've heard from are on the job. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to go ahead and provide them. And do let us know how you found tonight's program, whether it's in the chat or by email to my office at supervisor@simitian.org. You can always just send us a message through that vehicle. And we're always ready to improve, to do better. So if there's something you think that we can and should do to improve or do better, don't be shy. Truly want to do the best job we can. And the way we'll do that is by hearing from you. The hour is now 8:30. So I'm going to say thank you all once again. Much appreciated. And we will stay in touch, and we hope you will too. Take care, and thanks again.